Hello, welcome back. I am here today to talk to you about this wonderful book. It is called The Book You Were Born to Write by Kelly Notaras. I am very fortunate that this book arrived on my desk, on my lap, right as I needed it. I was trying to determine how I could convert my journal that I kept for a year into a manuscript, and I didn't know where to begin. And Kelly's book teaches you from soup to nuts how to do that. It gives you the structure. It talks to you about the process from A to Z of publishing. And I couldn't have written my book without it, for absolute certain. And if you are anything like me, if you do not come from the literary world, if you don't consider yourself a writer, I would highly recommend that you give thought to purchasing this book, and we'll give you some more details for you to help you make that decision. But I will tell you this, is that whether you're fiction or nonfiction, the book has nuggets in it for everybody, but particularly for nonfiction writers, and especially in the transformational market, then that is Kelly's specialty, and she kind of caters to that a little bit more here. But once again, I am Tina Moody, and I am the author of The Spiritual Awakening of an Analytical Mind, as well as co-host to the podcast Intuition Talks. And as I just said, I could not have written that book without the help of The Book You Were Born to Write. So let's dig into this. Okay, let's begin with Kelly. So Kelly Notaras is an editor by trade, and as I mentioned, her company's name is KN Literary Arts, and I believe she's based out of the Denver area. And I'm going to go ahead and just read her bio that's on the sleeve of the book, so I don't represent her or misrepresent her at all. Kelly is the founder of KN Literary Arts, an editorial studio that has helped over 500 authors edit, write, and market their work since opening its doors in 2013. Kelly started her career working in the editorial divisions at HarperCollins, Penguin, and Hyperion Books. She was later VP Associate Publisher at Sounds True, a multimedia spirituality publishing company in Boulder, Colorado. Since starting KN Literary Arts, she has been honored to edit a wide variety of transformational nonfiction books, including New York Times bestseller The Tapping Solution by Nick Otner and Pussy, a Reclamation by Regina Thomasschauer. Sorry. She lives and works from the mountains of Colorado. Visit her at knliterary.com. So this book was published in 2008. So we're 5-6 years into it at this point, and have lived through COVID, right? So some of the information, especially around kind of like book talk, probably wasn't even a thing, right? So she doesn't get into book talk at all in this, but there's so many great nuggets in here. So as far as her business, she and her team offer coaching and editing services, and not to keep using soup to nuts, but soup to nuts. Every level of the editing service, you can, hire them for those services, as well as different levels of coaching. Then when you get into writing, they can help with book proposals, book doctoring, and collaborative writing as well. And since I had started investigating Kelly back in 2019, I think it was, she's actually added a self-publishing piece to that, which I didn't know until I was prepping for this. And it's basically many of the services that I have talked about in my cooperative publishing. So it's not a cooperative publisher, but kind of that hybrid model a little bit. And I found that fascinating that she's expanded into that as well. So you can find her on knliterary.com. I don't think there's an arts in there. And then, and how the other place that I found her was on YouTube. And that is, I think she used to go by just Kelly Notaras, but now she goes by at KN Literary Arts. And on there are YouTube videos going back to when I was watching her, 3-4 years ago. And they're super helpful. Like I watched or listened to all of them while I was doing other things, and it kind of reinforced the stuff that was in the book as well. And I may have started doing that before the book arrived on my doorstep, because I was anxious to hear what she had to say. So just to increase Kelly's street cred even more, she often teams with Reed Tracy. For those that may not know Reed, I didn't at first. He is the president and CEO of Hay House, and Hay House, as most of us know, is the kind of, I believe they're the worldwide leader in self-empowerment publishing. So they are, a mega publishing house, especially if you're writing in that transformational type book setting. And so I tell you this stuff to let you know that Kelly knows her stuff. Like, listen to her. Like, and I'll get into this more, but I use the formats that she provided in this book to write my book, and it allowed me to write it in a very easy way. And that sounds weird, but it wasn't a struggle to write the book. I was able to break it down into components to write it, and I'm going to get into what I personally took from it after we get into a little bit of what's in this book. Okay, so now let's get into what's in the book. And for those that are like me and work better with bullet points, this is your kind of book. She has made it so easy for us to follow along and kind of know how she's going to structure each part. So she breaks the book into 3 parts, and then within each of those 3 parts are either 3 or 4 chapters that are related to that part. So part 1 is, my cheat sheet, before you start writing. Part 2 is the writing process, and part 3 is the path to publication. And then, like, one of the best parts is that at the end there's an appendix, and in there she gives templates. She gives templates for doing an outline, or she gives templates for, depending on what type of book you're writing, she gives a template for writing, structuring your book. And if you follow that, it just gives a nice flow to the book, and it makes it easy to write. So let me tell you about each of these chapters real quickly. So you have part 1, before you start writing, and chapter 1 is understand what you're getting yourself into. And that may seem silly. Don't skip over it, please, because that's that reality check, and it's also that confidence boost. Like, know what you're getting into here. It's only going to benefit you in the long run to decide, am I going to move forward, or am I not going to move forward, and how am I going to move forward? Chapter 2 is get clear on your motivation. Why are you writing this book? And she gives you questions to ask yourself. Like, there's a little tough love in there, which I love. Chapter 3, which I wouldn't have realized, even though I come from a sales and marketing background, is craft your hook. So she really gets into defining what this book is going to be, so you can, it's the elevator pitch kind of thing. If you get in an elevator and somebody asks you what your book's about, that you can just reel that off. And so get very clear with that. And it also gives you direction as you're writing the book as well. And then chapter 4 is building your outline. And again, she gives templates for this, which is awesome. And she talks about, the rough draft, when you're just kind of thought dumping to get that started. So that is part 1 of the book. Part 2 is the writing process. So the chapters are just start writing. Like, we get so up in our head and block ourselves from just starting. And that can take so many forms. For me, it was a journal. That's how I started writing, was a journal, and then doing a blog. So you'll find your approach as well. Let's see, chapter 6 is handle your resistance. And I have to be honest, I can't remember exactly what is in there other than self-doubt, or somebody saying, are you sure you want to do this? Are you really a writer? I didn't know you were a writer. Like, handling all of that, because it's going to come in like a barrage here. And then chapter 7 is work with an editor, because you do want to clean it up. None of us want to put something out that isn't going to be good quality. And so working with an editor, and that means different levels of that. It could be developmental, it could be content. And so learning about all those different levels of editing and how many times your work should go through there so that it is a higher quality of work as well. Okay, the final piece, which is part 3, and that includes 4 chapters, and it really gets into, like, the first chapters around platform. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here on that, because we did a whole video last month, I think it was, on platform building, so you can go back and reference that video to get information there. But if we decide that we want to move forward at this point with publishing in whatever form it may be, self-publishing to traditional publishing, we need to begin today. And she gives the reasoning behind that and details as to how to do that. So super useful, absolutely. The second chapter of this part is finding an agent and writing proposal. Once again, information, regardless of which way you go, you now have that knowledge. So around building a platform, like it showed me that that wasn't the option for me right now, but I at least gained that information as to what it would take to write a 60-page book proposal, what I would need to do to find an agent, the query letter that goes into that. And so if nothing else, I used that information to decide to go a route that made more sense for me in this situation. For book 2, maybe I go a different route, or book 3 or 4 or whatever it may be, whatever my future may hold. But at least I have some baseline information to make some decisions that make sense for my situation. Does it make sense? So with that, chapter 3 of that is around traditional publishing, and chapter 4 is around self-publishing or hybrid publishing. And again, it just gives us the information that we need to make the decisions that make sense for our own situation in the publishing world. So all super helpful. And again, as I mentioned, she kind of ends that with the appendix that offer the templates for an outline, or for the outline of the actual book structure, which was tremendous. So all great stuff. And that's kind of a quick synopsis of the book you were born to write. Okay, as we wrap this up, I thought it would be interesting for me to tell you what things I pulled from the book that were most critical in me bringing my book to life. And this is kind of a combination of Kelly's YouTube videos along with this book. I mean, this book was really, as I mentioned, the reference guide that sat on my desk as I was pulling this together. So here are the things that were most useful for me. Number 1, the necessity of a platform. And again, we talk about that in a prior video. Like I had no idea about this whole platform thing. And it was definitely a reality check when because that's the way she gives the information as well. Like she doesn't sugarcoat things, yet she gives you confidence as well. So it did 2 things for me. It made me get started right away on my website, social media, sending out emails and building that email distribution that I had. But the other thing, kind of longer term, is that it made me realize that I did not have a sufficient enough following to go the traditional publishing route. And luckily, this information kind of came in through reading and through those videos, that it didn't make me sad when I came to that realization. It was okay. Like I was okay with making the decision to go with a cooperative publisher. And the other part of that is I don't want to say waste the time, but I felt confident enough in my decision that I then didn't take that time to write that 60-page book proposal, which I think there's many, many great things you can garner from that. But for this part of my journey with that book, it didn't make sense for me. And so the more information we can pull in, we can make those type of decisions for ourselves, right? So there's that. The other part of what helped me was that reading her book made me feel like I wasn't over my head. Like, again, didn't consider myself a writer, was not anywhere in the, literary world. Yet in reading this book, it made me realize I can do this. Like, I just need to take these little steps. And at the end of that, I'm going to have a book. And that was really incredible. Like, I never took pause and said, I can't do this. It's just, you have to figure out what kind of direction you want to take. I couldn't necessarily do the traditional publishing route, but I could go this way. And that was awesome. So at the same time, it, as I mentioned, does give you the reality checks so that you're not, your head's not up here thinking that all these great things are going to happen. And you spend, 3 years trying to make it happen. Like, my book got out and that's what I wanted. So I liked that part. The other thing was the outline, just reinforcing the importance of an outline, the messy first draft, building the outline. She introduces you to this software called Scrivener that allows you to build the outline into this form and then start writing your story within it. And it allows you to move things around. And so that was invaluable. Like, that was a huge bonus for me and allowed me to build this book in a very systematic way. The other thing that was helpful, and I kind of just mentioned on this a couple of minutes ago, was that learning what goes into searching for, and I don't want to say acquiring because that sounds weird, but anyway, and a literary agent, the query letter, the writing the book proposal, that it could take X amount of time and X amount of query letters to get somebody that's interested in you, and that's before they go out and try to get a publisher beyond that. So learning that whole process of doing the query letter, doing the book proposal, the process of just landing a deal with a traditional publisher, that was knowledge that I now have with me, even though I didn't go that route. And lastly, for a nonfiction writer in that transformational arena, having her provide the outline structures, like literally putting them in this book, allowed me to write my book. I mean, honestly, I used that outline to write my book, and it made it so easy. And I hear other authors being like, the struggle of writing, oh, the angst of writing. And this just flowed out, because if I didn't feel like writing on one thing one day, I could go to a different chapter and grab there and write on that for a while. And so it was just a nice flow, and I so appreciated that. And with that, I think this is a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed learning about the book you were born to write. I will put a link to this book as well as my book to Amazon in the show description. And I think I'm going to share with you a book each month. And it won't always, like I mentioned, be about the book journey. It may be about the journey of self-discovery or transformation. But next month, I think I'm going to stick with the book journey and share with you some information about Stephen King on Writing, another great book. And I guess that's it. Thanks for listening today. And until next week, be well and enjoy your adventure.